That, you know, and at the same time, I don't think the hypocrisy that my colleague talks about is something that you see from both sides of the aisle.
Absolutely.
Because there's a lot of Republicans who talk about cutting the deficit, but they were the first to line up to vote for this or to support this tax cut.
Well, you know, I don't know. I have a feeling. I mean, the Tea Party movement. I'm surprised that Jim DeMint has come out against this, and he's sort of one of the Tea Party's favorite senators. Sarah Palin has come out against this tax cut plan, and no one really knows exactly what her plans are right now for her future. But I'm surprised that we haven't heard more from the Rand Pauls of the world and some of these other Tea Party-linked backed politicians who won in November. Because this seems to be right up their alley, and we're not hearing from them coming out and saying that adding this much money to our deficit right now is not a good thing.
How about John Boehner?
How about John Boehner, who was on the record saying, I mean, he was on the record saying that
he should be crying again.
Well, he probably will sometime very soon. The man is easily moved to tears, and I don't know that that's necessarily such a bad thing as a sensitive guy myself. But I'm amazed by this. I'm amazed by it, Liz.
I know.
Am I naive?
No, I don't think you're naive, but I do think that we're seeing, people keep saying this is the worst partisanship they've seen. I heard a statement this morning on the radio that it's been decades since there's been this much animosity. There's always animosity. I think there's a lot of other things that come into play here, and that is that this country is broke. And this just changes the debate completely. The dollar is under attack. China, of course, is on the rise. I mean, we know all these things. And we know if there was one overriding thing that the American people were worried about and that the Tea Party people were worried about is that the ground seems to be moving under the United States. And nobody could imagine this. I mean, in my own lifetime, I mean, seeing GE and U.S. Steel and all these huge companies bite the dust. We're in for change. This is the result of globalization. Now we're trying to get away from it, saying, well, we can create jobs. But, you know, again, is it busy work or is it real jobs? And so I think what really is here is that there is a real sense that, as Dylan Thomas, or as Yates has said, the center won't hold. And I think people are feeling this about America being in deep trouble.
You know, it's funny that Liz mentioned the center, Richard, and a lot of people have been speculating that if this president is going to win another term, that he really has no choice but to move towards the center, that he sort of ran as a moderate, tried to convince people that he was, but that since taking office, he's been very liberal in his agenda and his priorities. Is this compromise with the Republicans on tax cuts, is this the beginning of a move to the middle for Barack Obama?
You know, there's a lot of experts that say that the president is moving to the middle, but I think President Obama has always been in the middle, and he's just been characterized and demonized by the right so much that he's looked like he's coming from the left. You have to remember that in this stimulus package, the president passed the biggest tax cut in American history. In the big business bill, in the small business bill, he gives tax credits to small businesses to create jobs. He's provided numerous amounts of tax incentives, and yet people say that the president is too far to the left. It's almost egregious to think that the president's too far to the left when he has basically taken a lot of Republican ideas and implemented them.
I don't know.
You know, you're living on a different planet.
Cap and trade, mandatory
not at all.
Purchase of health care.
Right.
Is this president in the middle, or is he a liberal? Is he vilified by the middle?
This is a Saul Alinsky, center of the mold, very leftist, Democrat.
Not at all.
Certainly,
Not at all.
Let me finish. Certainly a socialist by definition. If you look at what's happening, I mean, look at the health plan, which we're probably going to talk about soon, and what the philosophy is behind it. He's made it perfectly clear. I mean, now we even have a child care bill, which he all of a sudden appeared. I must say that took me by surprise, where they're going to dictate to kids in school what they should be eating in lower income neighborhoods. I mean, where did that come from? Came from Michelle. These are two people who took great advantage of the system and are now really laying out what their own philosophies are. And it happens to be that government can run things better than anybody else.
Let's talk about health care. This is the poll today. Richard, we've asked our viewers to weigh in on whether it should be mandatory to have health care coverage. A federal judge, most people probably know by now, struck down that part of the president's health care reform bill. The White House, though, is trying to put a little bit of a spin on it, saying that this does not mean that they won't be able to implement the rest of the bill. But, Richard, I mean, in all actuality, this wasn't just a small piece of the health care reform. This was really the whole kit and caboodle. And without this mandate that people buy health insurance, how are they going to be able to pay for everything else? That was really where they were getting the money from.
Look, let's talk about this court decision that happened in Virginia. The court decision in Virginia, it strikes down, you're correct, it strikes down the mandate portion of the healthcare piece of legislation. There are 20 other such cases that are happening across the country about this same mandate. In the judge's decision, he didn't say that there should be a stay on the mandate. He said that, we need to continue moving forward with the mandate until it goes to a higher court, because he knew it was going to see an appeal, meaning that he knew that there's more than one side to this story. On top of that, this court, the striking down of that particular portion it also puts in jeopardy the parts of legislation that Republicans liked, like, getting rid of pre-existing conditions to health care coverage. And at the end of the day, this bill is still, this law, not even a bill, is a step in the right direction in making sure that Americans have access to health care. They're trying to make the argument that's being made by the echo chamber that's being made by the right. They talk about how you can't mandate health care, but almost every state in the United States of America mandates car insurance.
Well, there's a difference, though, because you don't have to have a car, Richard. That's really the difference, and there are policing laws that are sort of in effect when you're talking about people operating a motor vehicle. This is something totally different, Liz, where it doesn't matter, you have to get this. The government was saying in this law that you must purchase health insurance.
I'd like to go back to something to what our guest said earlier about Obama being responsible for the largest tax cut in history. Where does that come from?
When the president passed the stimulus package, that package had the largest middle-class tax cut in American history.
So I see spending $1 trillion out of taxpayers' money is the same as lowering their taxes. That's the craziest kind of reasoning I've ever heard.
Well, first, it wasn't $1 trillion. It was just around 700. It was around 700.
It was a little over 8, almost 9. What's a couple of million?
A couple of hundred million.
A couple of $100 million.
But it's different. It's definitely different. It's definitely different than $1 trillion.
I mean, that just is not a true statement that it's the largest tax cut in history.
It's the largest middle class tax cut in American history.
Well, now it's middle class. You keep redefining it. I see no evidence of that.
When the president came in, when the president was sworn in, we had a negative 6% GDP growth. In core period 3, we had a 2.5% increase in the GDP. This shows that the stimulus package is working, that the tax credit
and I suppose 9.8 unemployment is also an indication that it's working.
You have to understand, basic economics tells us that employment is something that lags behind. Employment lags behind economic growth. So the GDP growth that we saw in core period 3 are jobs created in February, March, and April. That's very simple.
This is the party line, of course.
Well, and everybody's got party lines, Liz.
No, but I mean, I want statements of fact, and you can hardly say that.
That is a statement of fact. Every college.
You want to put that up against the Reagan tax cuts? Is that what you'd like to do?
Well, let's talk about the Reagan tax. If the president is employing some of those same strategies by decreasing the payroll tax by 2%, I
never should have mentioned Reagan because because Obama now that's one of his latest tactics. It's comparing himself to Reagan. If it's not Lincoln, it's Reagan.
Richard, I'll give you the last word here. We're going to say goodbye to you. You've been very kind to join us. Your final thoughts for today, and I'd love for you to tell me whether you think it's a good idea for Michael Steele to be running again.
Well, I think first, let me say that I'm urging my colleagues and members of the House to pass this tax plan.
Yeah.
But about Michael Steele running for re-election, I think this shows why the Republican Party is in limbo. They're not really sure. There really is no clear leadership in the Republican Party, and that makes me feel optimistic going into the 112th Congress and going further on into the 2012 election. The Republican Party is not really sure what direction they're going in.
Richard Fowler is the director of the Phoenix Freedom Pact. Good to see you again, Richard. Thanks very much for joining us.
Thanks for having me.
Liz is going to stick around. I'd love to get